America is broken. Society has grown increasingly depraved. The elites have grown more decadent and corrupt. This isn't just the United States. I think this is Western civilization, more broadly speaking. And people are forming scapegoats, as Rene Girard would say, as to who should be at blame for this. They're blaming ethnicities, they're blaming certain groups. But I want to focus in on one claim that I had considered years ago, and that is to ask the question whether or not Christianity is to blame for the decline of Western civilization. So I want to let you into my head a little bit, into my mind, into my life, just a little bit more. I'm a very private person by nature, but I think this might be worth talking about at this point. Years and years ago, I was reading the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and I've read quite a bit about him. I've made videos about the guy, and at some point in life, some of his ideas resonated with me. Though I was a Christian, here's why I think that Christianity is not to blame for the decline in Western civilization. I've heard people who claim to be pagans recently say that this is a Jewish superstructure squashing down this native Western European culture. It's not the right way to look at it. This is a Jewish religion, a Jewish savior who has smothered our ancestral gods, so to speak, whether that's a metaphor to you or something literal. I did not grow up in a thoroughly Christian home. I don't want to cause any insult, or some things are just not worth talking about publicly. I'm very grateful my mother had me read the Bible, starting as a teen, though I was angry about it. I started reading the New Testament. My father did sometimes encourage me to pray, things like this. But we certainly didn't live a Christian life. At some point when I was a teenager, I began to going to church regularly on my own accord. I got an old car. My dad helped me with an old car, and I got that thing to church whenever I could. So I was working a manual labor job. That's all I'd ever known. And over time, just dirty, filthy, cutting down trees or repairing power line equipment and all kinds of stuff. And then I would make sure to get my old 79 Oldsmobile and drive it an hour through the woods one way to get to church, because I had made the decision at some point in my life that I wanted to be a good man and not a drunkard, not addicted to drugs. I wanted to try to marry a good woman and be faithful to her. And I'm not a perfect man, but these are decisions that I made as a teen. And I've had to grow in those decisions too. It's not a one-time choice. But I started going to church all the time, just around the clock. By the way, this is a coin. This is a coin, I'm holding it in my hand, from Constantine the Great. I don't know if you can see this, but this coin is minted with Constantine the Great's image. This coin is from right after Constantine's life, probably minted by his offspring, but I thought that was pretty cool. God used that church to help me and to bring me along. They preached, flee youthful lust. They preached to read the Bible, to pray, and I appreciate those things. But here's I was probably a little rougher around the edges than maybe even my parents were aware of. I mean, I used to get in fights out in the neighborhoods and all this stuff. I mean, I'm not a tough guy, but I've thrown fists a time or two. So when I started going to church, those good things, I think God was using that church to bring those out on me. But what I also saw, and I also saw eventually in myself, that later caused me some dissonance, was I saw generations of young men growing up in Baptist evangelical churches, and this isn't all of them. This isn't a diss against Protestantism. But they were creating a generation of nice guys, of good boys. They really stressed, don't do anything bad, don't chase women, don't drink, don't smoke, don't cuss, don't fight. And what I saw in others was a lot of boys who got older and became the age of men, but in a lot of ways stayed boys. And they thought as long as they didn't do bad things, at least not publicly. And if I'm being honest, you and I both know a lot of these good boys were doing immoral things behind the scenes. I mean, how often are the good boys addicted to pornography? how often will good boys, you know, if they ever get a chance with a beautiful woman, they'll take it. I saw all this, and what I also saw was that some of these good boys thought that if they just didn't do bad things, they were good men. And this just isn't the case, because the absence of doing bad things doesn't mean you've grown in virtue, strength, courage, honor, responsibility, accountability. It doesn't mean you've grown into a good man. It just means you didn't do some of the bad things, which is good, but it doesn't make you a good boy. And the first time I saw this in myself was, I had been in a few fights, not a lot, but a few. And I started going to that church, and I remember a dude much bigger than me. I found out he passed away, which kind of broke my heart. He died young. But this dude, I don't know, we didn't like each other, and he was a lot bigger than me. And we were on the front of this Baptist congregation, and I'm a teenager. I'm probably still wearing flannel in my boots and all this. And for whatever reason, I don't know who started it, probably misunderstanding, he just laid into me. He shoved me like fighting hard. And I went back, braced myself, and then me being kind of a hothead. People think I'm nice. The kindness is practiced. So I'm a little stronger than I looked, and I shoved him quite forcefully. His eyes got huge, and he flew backwards, and he got mad, and he shoved me, and we did this. I fell into the pew at some point. The force of this guy's shove knocked me down on the pew on my butt. And I remember standing up and thinking, well, I'm going to take care of this right here, right now. And I had just started going to church, and I remember looking up and seeing the pastor's face on the platform, getting ready to start the service. And I thought, if I stand up, the police are going to have to be called, and it's going to disrupt the service for everybody. And that pastor is going to be disappointed in me. And so it hurt me worse to sit there and take it as he smirked and walked away than it would have to take a punch to the face. But I remember thinking, okay, I'm trying to think of others here, and I'm furious, but I just backed down. Is this making me weaker than I should be? It's a silly thing now that I'm an adult, but that's just what was in my teenage boy mindset. What I can tell you is I later saw in myself such a focus on serving God that though I knew how to do things, my dad showed me how to do some things, my father-in-law showed me how to do some things, which I'm so grateful for. I found in myself I didn't have the know-how to do some of the skilled things that other men older than me knew how to do. And that bothered me. And so I've corrected that now. But what I do know is there's a lot of Christian men who don't know how to do things. Let's be blunt. I don't think some of these guys could fight if they had to. Some of these guys, they won't flirt with women, but what they'll do is they'll talk to them in this cringy boy-like way, but these guys are 30, 40, cringy boyish way, which, I'm kind of boyish in the sense that I like to have fun. I get it. But I'm talking about if you're flirting with a woman, maybe she's married, and you're pretending not to flirt, that's not good. That's something that people should work on. That's something you should watch. They don't know how to do things. They don't work hard. They don't want to take accountability. They don't want to take responsibility. But hey, they don't do some of the bad things, so they're good men. I say nonsense. Polite doesn't equal kind. And I saw men who would submit themselves to these overbearing pastor figures. And I thought, this seems like it's making me something I don't want to be. And I heard a guy on I think it was a construction worker, maybe I was working construction at the time, and the guy's like, Christian men are just weak. They don't do anything. And at some point that resonated with me. So flash forward, I'm trying to figure out, I'm sort of deconstructing from some of what I believe as a Christian years later. And I'm reading Friedrich Nietzsche. And Friedrich Nietzsche blames the decline in Western civilization to some degree on Christianity. Democracy, socialism, Christianity. Now, Friedrich Nietzsche is very nuanced, and whatever I say here, I can't encapsulate all of it. The thing is, he's not wrong about everything. He's just not. I'll say this, I agree with some of Nietzsche's critiques of modernity, but put him in his place, see him where he lived. He lives in pre-Nazi, but post-Reformation, post-Enlightenment, post-Holy Roman Empire. What does Germany even mean? What does it mean to be German? What is that? You have all these Germanic peoples, and now they've cast off the Holy Roman Empire, they've cast off the religion of their ancestors that built the West. But just consider Nietzsche's context, right? And he sees this weird, weakened Germany, as did Wagner and Hitler. After the Reformation, German nationalism grew. Let's build our identity, this greater Germania. Let's build it. All the Germanic peoples can come together. When before they had been unified by historic Christianity, that had redeemed them, baptized them, taken who they were, and made that culture richer, but not weaker, but more peaceful, I would say. Nietzsche lives sort of at the decline of all that, right? So how do you fix it? So Nietzsche blamed slave morality, and he wanted more of the master morality. So he had this concept called ressentiment. It's like the word resentment, and what that means is like a deep resentment that causes hostility. It's people who are, let's face it, they're weak people who are frustrated with their circumstances. They can't win in life, and they always blame somebody else. They always blame the rich. They always blame the aristocrats in Nietzsche's day. They always blame, you pick the thing that the group that people are blaming right now, whether it's based on race or ethnicity, straight white male, or I've seen black people blamed, whatever the case is. If someone is seen to be having some sort of privilege or above you, well, it must be, my situation is 100% their fault. And what you do is then you pretend to be kind, you pretend to be nice, and you shove down this resentment deep inside of you. But the reality is the only reason you're nice is because you're scared of the consequences of what would happen if you do what you wanted to do. And I know people like this. I saw those, the potential for that in my own chest. In other words, I'm only nice because I'm scared. I'm nice to the stronger guy because I don't want to think about what he might do to me. I'm nice to the alpha. I'm nice to the rich guy. I'm nice to the beautiful woman. I'm nice to but I'm only nice for ulterior reasons. But the reality is, some people, including some people who go to church, would take their neighbor's wife in a heartbeat if they thought they had a shot with no consequences. And it's true. Some good boys who go to church, if they ever got in a fight to the death with your friends, they run. I met this guy in the Marine Corps. He was actually Navy, but he got sent out to a Marine Corps infantry unit. So he loved Marines. And he was a Norwegian, and he had crazy eyes, man. I wish I could find that guy. I love that guy. We had some good talks, man, and we respected each other. But the Marine Corps never sent me to combat, but he went to combat, ironically. And he wanted to die in combat. He wanted to go back and die so he could go to Valhalla. And man, I love that guy. And we'd work out together, just respected each other. He saw this kid who was in the Navy when we were in this class together, and the kid in the Navy said, I think I could have went in the Marine Corps, which it's whatever. He probably could have, had he worked for it. And this this post-traumatic sailor flipped out. And he starts looking at him. He says, I see the fear in your eyes. You would get Marines killed. He didn't have perfect English, Marines would die because of you. You would hesitate. I see the fear in you. I remember he might have flipped a table. Maybe that's just my imagination. But he's not fully wrong. Because there's a difference between being kind and just being polite and nice because of some sort of fear. Is the decadence in Western civilization because of Christ followers? So Christianity affirmed this idea that in Christ there is neither male nor female, nor Jew, nor Greek, nor rich, nor poor. So when I'm before the Eucharist, my wife points this out and she loves it. She's brought it up several times. When we're before the Eucharist, at adoration or at Mass, we've been to several different parishes, and you'll see rich people, lawyers, attorneys, construction workers, janitors, unemployed, all kneeling on the same plane before Christ. It's in some way makes us equal. Not in every sense, but in a sense, it truly does, in comparison to the thing we're kneeling before. Christianity affirms the value of every human life when society often doesn't, whether that person is of a different ethnicity, or they're not born yet, they're in the womb. Christianity thinks that it is an absolute truth that human life means something, including the weak, including the deformed, including the poor. And so that did change society. So now you have a tremendous amount of resources going to hospitals and schools and charity. There really wasn't charity in the sense that we think of it before Christianity. But what this does is it allows, in Nietzsche's mind, the weak to sort of flourish in a sense and shove down all this hostility and angst and desire for power into resentment and hostility until they can one day hopefully enslave their masters, take down the aristocrats, force slave morality on the strong, when Nietzsche thought the strong should rule. He said that it's only by aristocratic society that any advancement in civilization has come, not from the weak. I could ramble for hours, but I'll make this quick. Essentially, this reminds me of a critique when the Roman Empire began to fall. Some of the Romans blamed Christianity, this religion that sought peace. Doesn't mean every Christian is peaceful, but in general, yeah, it made people more prone towards peace. It just did. And then when the Roman Empire began to crumble, people began to blame Christianity. And so St. Augustine wrote a book, I think this was City of God, in which he's pointing out, the pagan gods never really did as much for you as you think they did. You wouldn't have these problems if the pagan gods could help you. And it's not Christianity. He makes this apologetic for Christianity, for Catholicism. Here's what I see. I see sexual depravity being promoted as good. This is not a popular opinion, but I think sexual depravity has been promoted as good and is getting more and more depraved. And I've read Foucault and I've read Jean-Paul Sartre, and I saw what Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir did with underage girls, and I'm seeing polyamory now being claimed as a sexual identity. And if that's how you feel about yourself, I'm not condescending to you, but what I'm saying is, I don't think it's right. And I'm saying, for centuries now, not in the 90s, not even in the 60s, back to the 40s, the 30s, and before that, even to Nietzsche's day, he's seeing just degeneracy spread around, and then Christians saying, well, we need to be nice, right? So perhaps it's Christianity's fault. I don't think it's Christianity's fault. You can't blame Christ for Jeffrey Epstein. You can't blame Christ for Harvey Weinstein. You can't blame Christ. You can't blame Diddy on Jesus, even if Diddy claims Jesus. You can't blame the stuff in Hollywood that they shove down our generation's throats on Jesus or St. Paul or St. Augustine. So here's just a few things that I've noticed. The sexual libertarian movement is sort of claiming actually the opposite, that it was Christianity that imposed their arbitrary and cruel rules about sexual discipline and restraint on the rest of us, and our views are the more natural views, the more human views. This is actually something kind of like what Nietzsche thought. And it's these evil sexual prudes that have kept us from having sex with 87 women or 1,000 men or underage girls, or this isn't going to end where it is now. I've already seen a guy on the Young Turks talk about, I don't know if it was a video or what, but apparently all I remember is him saying, a woman and a horse. The horse didn't mind. And it made his co-host so uncomfortable. He's being logically consistent. On what grounds would you say that's evil at this point in modern society? But Christianity from the beginning, from Christ, takes sexuality not as though the body is bad, not as though you're bad or evil or you're gross or that sex is bad or gross. No, but it takes it down to the deeper level of the human heart. Because at the end of the day, we're not just bodies, we're bodies and souls. And what we do in our body affects our soul. And so for me to take a woman and turn her into an object, a disposable object to get my gratification, I'm not treating her like a full human being. Eros is not a bad thing, erotic love. But erotic love in a natural situation would typically lead to what? Family, emotional bonding, intimacy, things like this that we've just tried to discard. St. Augustine talked about his own, I think he was basically addicted to sex. And he talks about how, he read it pretty heavily, but he's preaching a sexual restraint. Because in his day, like ours, Epicureanism or hedonism or just whatever feels good, do it, was the mantra of the day. That was what the sole purpose of life for some people in some philosophies. And he got a hold of a book by Cicero, a pre-Christian pagan man, who said, no, restraint, virtue, things like this are necessary for a full life. And that spurred something in St. Augustine's mind, and eventually picked up a Bible, became a Christian, then a bishop. My point being, it's people who blame Christianity for putting up these walls in society, and that we need to tear them down. But what if the walls are put there for a reason? Study what the ancient, rich, powerful Roman men did. Do you really want that to come back? Because it's coming back. I think that restraint, by choice, not because you have to, a woman who could get lots of men or a man who could get lots of women, but chooses restraint, even sometimes when it's not easy or uncomfortable, that's not weakness. That means you have control over your own body. A person who can control their appetites, whether it's for food or sex or whatever, or alcohol, that person has control over themselves. That's not weakness. The irony is, I think Nietzsche saw real problems in society, but I think he himself was probably a bit of a hypocrite. He's probably a bit of a coward. Nietzsche, it turns out, was a fairly weak man. I'm not condescending to him, but he ranted and raved about strength and power and the Übermensch. He himself was nothing of the kind. He never found a woman who wanted him permanently. He ranted against women, and yet he depended upon the charity of his sister to survive. He talks about the strong being in charge, but when he saw a strong man beating a horse, legend has it he collapsed and tried to shield the horse because he couldn't handle it. But that contradicts with what he said in The Twilight of the Gods. Our charity should be to destroy the weak. Let's help these people to their charity. Our charity is to take out the weak. He couldn't even handle a horse being beaten. I think Nietzsche had extreme ressentiment against the loss of his father at a young age, against the God he didn't believe in. Nietzsche said he wanted the West, Germany, his people, Europe, to go back to Dionysius, this joyful God. But the thing is, if you've ever read the Bacchus myths or Dionysian myths, sure, there was joy, but there was also absolute debauchery. It's probable people were sacrificed to Bacchus. These were disgusting rituals. Is that really what you want? Here's what I think. I look at Christ, and for a while, I really did wonder, does Christianity make men weak? Does Christianity make me weak? And I'm not a bodybuilder. I'm not a macho man. I'm just a regular guy. What I think, though, is that I have more respect for a man who pushes through his struggles with health, his struggles with emotional scarring from childhood, who pushes through the exhaustion of work, I've been working around the clock here for the last couple of weeks, around the clock, but I'm still trying to be there for my kids. I'm still trying to make sure my wife knows that I love her and I spend time with her. I respect a guy who works 60, 70 hours a week, comes home, and instead of collapsing on the couch, goes out and plays ball with his kids, takes his wife out on a date. That's strength. That's strength. I will respect that to my grave more than a guy who gets a Lamborghini and 80 supermodels who don't love him or care about him. They themselves are posing. They're in it for that power struggle because they think he can benefit them socially or financially more than some other man. I don't respect a man like that as much as I do a man who's faithful to his wife, his children, his God, who cares more about what's honorable and right than about what this stupid social media, degenerate Hollywood, nonsensical celebrity influencer culture thinks. I respect that so much more. Was Christ weak? When Nietzsche was at his peak, his prime, he thought that Christianity was sort of evil, and he would have looked at a man like Christ. So he had some good things to say, but this public image of Christ, as he thought, was, it was weak when he died in Nicaeus, not the crucified one. He's the Antichrist. Here's what I see now in Jesus after a lot of reflection. Here's what I think is true. A lot of you may not agree with this, but this is just this is what I think. I'm convinced of this. I took a lot of time to reflect on Christ, and now I think I've never seen a stronger man. Here's a man who loved his mother, who was rejected by society because of accusations of what she did. I guarantee you she went through some hard times. Here's a man who knew who he was in God. His will was in perfect, obedient alignment to his Father. Now, Christ is God. The Father is God. But his will was in perfect obedience to the Father. And Christ told the truth when it was time to tell the truth. But when he's looking at someone who's caught in sin, enslaved by sin, he does this in love with their best interest in mind. And that's where I see his strength. And Christ went to his death, his brutal torture death, not denying the truth about himself, who he was. But even in his unjust death, false accusations, trying to find a way to murder him, to do away with him, because they saw him as a threat. The Pharisees and the Sadducees to their power, and this puppet king, Herod, and perhaps Pilate. He went to that death, dying even for them. And when they beat him and they ripped out his beard and they stripped the flesh off of his back and they mocked him and said, "Hail, King of the Jews," over his criminal's cross, and they drove spikes in his hands and his feet. Here's what the New Testament says. And when they came to the place which is called the Skull, there they crucified him and the criminals, one on the right hand and one on the left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." That's strength. It's strength because if you are Barney Fife and you're nice to everybody because you know everybody could hurt you or overpower you, that's not strength. That's not even kindness. That's just perhaps anxiety or fear. But if you're Superman, if you're Henry Cavill's Clark Kent, and you're kind, that's a choice. Superman being kind, it's funny, Nietzsche talked about the Superman. It's funny, there's a Superman story where Superman creates this world to see what would happen should he die. And he watches history unfold, and then you see this little frame of Friedrich Nietzsche writing about the Superman, and Superman himself sees this, which is kind of cool. But Superman, in the sense of the American superhero, if he had that much strength truly, and he didn't just take all the women and the wealth and the power if he's giving of himself to try to bring others to a better version of themselves, strength. That's kindness not out of force, but kindness out of a choice, your choice. on your terms. What Nietzsche missed is that this slave morality, as he called it, would be detrimental because it kind of brings people down to the lowest common denominator. No, the strength of Christ is that he gave himself in love and service for us, for others, weaker than himself. But he did that not to let us stay there, not to cater to moral depravity and weakness and filth. He did that so that we could become the better versions of ourselves, so that we could be like Christ, so that we could have thicker chests and grow in virtue and courage and charity and faith and hope and wisdom and restraint, so that we could face the depravity of this world and the ridiculous stuff in it and the petty people. How do you deal with that? Well, if you're strong, you can deal with it as Christ dealt with us. And that is, you may hate me, you may spit in my face, you may try to kill me, but at the end of the day, even if you make yourself my enemy, I still want what's best for you. I want you to be able to grow and live a fuller life. That's strength. I think that the depravity in society, the weakness in society, the corruption in society is not because we lean too far into a rich, robust Christianity. It's because we hollowed out Christianity and we made it nice and weak and culturally palatable and robbed it of its fullness, robbed it of its challenge, robbed us of the demands of Christ, and a full, rich Christianity in which we all, by God's grace, not by our strength, by God's grace, submitted ourselves to God's will and tried to love others as Christ loved us. That would be so healing for society. If more of us did that, I think the depravity, the corruption, the darkness in the world would flee before the light. The hard part about that is I can't just pick other people's sins to condemn. I want the best for those people if I can, as much as I can. And my sins too, and I've had them. I have to admit that I need to grow and repent in those areas as well. Christianity historically had provided a unifying, if I say mythology, well, you hear it the wrong way. I don't mean fake thing. I don't mean fake story. A mythology in the sense of a unifying cultural vision for who we are as a people, not just the United States. I'm talking about much of the world. We need that again. Christianity provides real hope in this life and the next. We need that again. Christianity provides God's grace in our lives. We need that again. It provides a framework for life that is challenging, to be sure. It's not always easy. It demands restraint and growth and repentance on our part. We need that again. So no, Christianity isn't to blame. And if I had to choose, and I have chosen, between Nietzsche and Christ, I choose Christ again and again and again. At the end of the day, Christ is the strongest man I've ever seen. Nietzsche called out the problems of modernity, laid the blame in the wrong place. Nietzsche was wrong. Whoever you are, I hope you know your life matters. Whatever you're going through, it ends, okay? God loves you. Life gets better. Please live the life that you have from where you are as well as you can and enjoy it. Thanks for watching. God bless.